had one of those days where the entirety of your mental load is focused on one singular, all-encompassing issue, but it feels like the universe or fate itself has chosen that same specific day to hurl literally every other problem your way? That's Peter Parker's life in this issue. Our story begins with our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man choosing not to help the police and putting his entire secret identity at risk by disrobing in the streets outside of his home. So why the big rush? Well, Aunt May has a little bit of a cold and Peter is taking care of her. But while our hero keeps his silent vigil, a new villain with extraordinary power is born as we get our first peek at Electro. As you have maybe guessed by the name, Electro controls electricity, which gives him the sickest finger guns in the biz. But we'll get more on him later. Forewarning, this story jumps around a ton. Anyways, Peter basically ignores everyone and everything around him. The other kids at school, academics, and even his current love interest, Betty Brant. Right now though, both of his eyes and his thoughts are only for his Aunt May, who has basically been like a mother to him. The whole thing is probably a little bit too exaggerated, but it's endearing how much Peter cares for his aunt. But we don't have any time for that mushy stuff now, because Electro is using his powers to rob a bank. It also just so happens that this robbery is taking place at the same time that everyone's favorite newspaper editor, J. Jonah Jameson, just happens to be there conducting some business. Electro makes his escape by scaling the wall of a nearby building in a way very similar to the way that Spider-Man does. So obviously, now Jonah thinks that Electro and Spider-Man are the exact same person. It's not long before the news makes the front page of the Daily Bugle, and the citizens of New York are really riled up about it, because why would the newspaper lie about something? It really just ends up being another tiny little jab at Peter Parker. As it turns out, May has a little bit more than just any common cold, and she has to have an operation done, but there's one small problem. It's really expensive. So now Peter has to go out and try and dredge up some buckarooskies to pay for the procedure. He tries to get a loan from JJ, but that's obviously a big no, unless he can prove that Spidey and Electro are the same, so he decides to go ahead and capture Electro himself to collect the reward. But saying you're going to do a thing and actually doing the thing when the universe really doesn't want you to are two very different things. Needless to say, he comes up with nothing but blanks for a while before finally finding his prey. And so it's fight time, and what a short fight that turns out to be. In just a few simple panels, our hero finds himself flat on his back and near death at the mere touch from Electro. Thankfully, Electro thinks that Spider-Man's dead, but it turns out he hasn't accounted for how durable our hero is, and he's simply unconscious. When I really think about it, this issue is filled with things that Peter can't face using just his raw powers as Spider-Man. He is helpless to do anything against his aunt's sickness other than to be there for her, and his raw physical power is pointless against Electro because it can't even touch him. This issue really seems to highlight that Peter Parker himself is actually more important in both situations. Anyways, defeated, Peter decides that to get the money he needs, he will have to use the world's earliest version of Photoshop to make it look like Spider-Man and Electro are the same. And finally, it's villain origin time. Electro is a man named Max Dillon. He was the best pole man in the biz, probably not something I brag about to my parents. He saves a man who is injured on a powered pole, but unfortunately he's struck by lightning. It knocks him to the ground, but strangely leaves him uninjured, but feeling stronger. It really doesn't take him long to realize that the electricity no longer harms him. It's actually the opposite, in fact. So he builds a special lab to charge up his power and creates the costume of Electro. Peter makes the decision to stay with Aunt May during the operation instead of going after Electro. It's probably the first time since Amazing Fantasy 15 that we've seen him choose Peter Parker over Spider-Man. Thankfully, the operation goes well and Peter is off to the races as Max has caused a prison riot in an attempt to gather himself some followers. There's also this really strange subplot going on with Betty. She doesn't want Peter to put himself in danger. The fact that he seems to enjoy the thrill reminds her of someone from her past. But we don't got no time for your crap, Betty, because it's rematch time. With the stress of his aunt's health gone, Spider-Man is able to fully focus on the problem at hand, much to the dismay of JJ, as he comes to realize that him and Electro can't possibly be the same. This time he's prepared with some cute little brown rubber booties and gloves that help insulate him from Electro's attacks. He easily battles his way through Electro's small army of convicts, and then the real battle begins. Electro hurls bolts of lightning at Peter, but he keeps deflecting them by throwing metal objects around the room. The battle intensifies as Spidey eventually lands a strong punch on Max, knocking him back into the bars of a cell. Unfortunately, the electric currents cause a blinding flash of light that blinds Spider-Man and recharges Electro. a slight distraction from some inmates, and the two are back at it. Also, for some reason, now Electro has a gun. Not that it really did anything, like, at all. Anyways, Electro grabs some wires off the wall and creates, like, shocking whips. I actually thought that these were awesome, way cooler than him using a dumb gun, as he flails them around, nearly catching Spider-Man. But Peter discovers Electro's secret weakness as he grabs a hold of a nearby fire hose and douses the man in water, which stops him cold. One of New York City's most powerful villains stopped by a little water. Touché. He unmasks Electro but doesn't recognize the man, so he gathers up his camera and he leaves him for the police to arrest. JJ is pissed that Peter initially, because he thinks he made him look foolish with the whole Spider-Man is Electro thing, but once he sees the photos that Peter has for him now, his tune totally changes. And so the story ends with Betty once again being dramatic, which causes friction in their relationship. They make amends, but this story will be continued another day. Anyways, I want to thank you for watching. I have tons of other great Spider-Man videos on the channel, so make sure to check them out.